All right, so welcome everyone.
As you can see here, I have just a local content server that is running on my machine, and let's get started on how to enable and configure Content Tracker. So as an administrator, you can go under Admin Server and then Component Manager, and down in the list you'll see Content Tracker as an option. You can check that and hit Save at the very bottom or Update. Otherwise, you can also navigate to the Advanced Component Manager page and cycle it through from the disabled component up to the enabled components. And then there are also some configurations that you need to be aware of when enabling this component. So I'll click Update here to walk you through them. So first off, Jason had mentioned it, but initially this checkbox is checked, this top one here. So this is only enabling Content Tracker to track content accesses. So that's kind of the bare bones way of doing it. You know, it's just going to track that. It's not going to track any of the custom services or the search services either. And so I'm going to have that unchecked on mine to show you a few more of the configurations available when that's the case. These next several are all kind of trying to optimize it and, you know, create the least amount of load on the system, because it's obviously tracking a lot. So, you know, a lot of user services are handling this. So this first one, these are different columns in the Content Tracker database that you can exclude from being populated. So that can help with load there. You can simplify the user agent string. So that's the user that's performing that action that gets tracked in the table. Here's the maximum days to retain the data. So I just have 60 as a default. That's what's going to get stored in the table. And then this next one is an option to either archive or delete the data after it's hit that, you know, maximum days retained. And so there's also the archive database table where the reports aren't going to necessarily pull from that, but you can keep that information if you needed. Otherwise, it's recommended that you delete it to, you know, reduce the load. And these ones keep a couple of the columns in the database table to a certain length. And I won't talk too much about these next ones. They're kind of outside of the scope of this webinar, but this first one, Jason talked a little bit about it. There's some customizations you can do, or custom logic you can add during that post-reduction step. And then the web beacon ID list. This is kind of relevant if you're using, say, Site Studio, or doing, if you have a reverse proxy setup to kind of cache some of the data, you can configure this to ensure that those actions are getting tracked by the content server and Content Tracker. So once you have that enabled, it does require a restart, but then you'll have the option to go to the Content Tracker administration. So let's jump over there and then open that applet. I actually already have it open, so here we go. So there are a couple tabs in here. The first one's very simple. It's really just enabling your content server to actually track the data. It should be checked by default, but if you get it installed and restarted and it's not tracking content, here's the first place you check to make sure that this is enabled. Next is the reduction tab. So you can come here, you can see kind of the data that's ready to be reduced. So for the last couple of days, I have some of the things, they've actually already been completed, but you can come here manually and reduce that data, although it's recommended that you schedule it, as Jason has mentioned. So here you can see, you can come to the Schedule tab and check the scheduling enabled checkbox, and then kind of go from there. So it's recommended that you run it daily. So maybe you just run it every weekday. It's recommended that you do it off hours because it does create load on the system. It gives you that option of scheduling this around your peak times. The next tab is the Snapshot tab. So this gives you some features on the actual content item itself. So you can get a little more information per content item. So what you see here, these are metadata fields, custom metadata fields that I created in my system. And essentially what this allows you to do is per content item, you know, you can get when that content item was last accessed. You can also get a count of how many times it was accessed in this short count, this short interval I set for 30 days, so the last month. There's also the long access count. So I set that for about 6 months. So you can kind of see any trends on content in those time frames. And then this last tab is only available if you have that first checkbox on the configuration page unchecked. But essentially what this allows you to do is track any service that you'd like. So if you have some custom services in your environment that you'd like to track, you can set that up here by clicking add and filling out the form. And you can see it gives you some examples like this get search results one. If I hit edit here, you can kind of see some of the information over here, as well as on the field map side, you can get additional information that's then can be put into the content tracker database table. So there are 10 columns that are available to use. And what you get with that is essentially a way to store this information. Like for this search one, you can get that query text that the user is actually using into the database, so you can report on that and maybe see some trends there. All right, so that is it for the applet. Now we can talk kind of about the reporting side of things. So there is an Oracle Content Tracker report component. It is, however, with 12c deprecated. And so what happens with that is you actually need to rename the component in order for it to work. That's not too hard to do. Fishbowl has the ability to provide that. But essentially what it is this report here. And it gives you a lot of good initial options that you can use. And so I'm going to jump over to one of our demo servers to kind of give you a little bit better of an idea. But essentially it's a pretty simple form. You give it the time frame. So let's say last week, you can say, what's the top content that was accessed last week in my system? Gives you the number of accesses, doc type. And so you can go to the content information page if you need to get more information about the specific item. Other ones you can track by, say, doc type. If you want to, see about a specific doc type, if there are trends regarding that, or say a user role, if there are specific users that should be looking at content, or maybe you're just trying to get a better idea of, HR users or sales users, what content are they looking at? You can do that with this report. You can also do some searches by users. So if you wanted to see, if you had a specific content item that should be viewed by specific users, you can come here and see which users have actually viewed that content and maybe which users are yet to view that content. You can do that here. There's also a couple good ones down here. You can kind of see what content items have not been used in a certain period. So, if in a couple month span items aren't being used, you can come here and do that. And then maybe you can purge that content out of your system. There's also users not active. So you can see if users aren't even using your system, that maybe should be. You can do that here. And so another feature that the content tracker reports gives you is on an actual content item, you can view the access history for that item. So you can see, this item has been viewed 4 times and by one user. So you can kind of click on that and get more information on those times, the dates, as well as which user it was. And one additional thing I wanted to show you before I jump over to Google Analytics is when you actually access the content using a Git file, it does log that initially, or right away, I should say. And so now you can see 5. However, if you right away, after viewing it, with the web viewable static link, this does not get updated. And what that shows you is it needs to be reduced. So it's logged elsewhere, not in the database that's reported on. So if you come here and actually run that, we can come run this report again, and now you can see 6. So it did then put that information in the database to then be reported on. And now I'd like to transition to the reports that we've created outside of Content Tracker. So we have the system metrics. So here we have just a nice graphic on the document history component or database table. So you can get some ideas on, when there's peak activity and what kind of activity that is, as well as a table of that information. And the next thing on the actual content tracker table, you can get additional information. So, a bunch of different services that have the ability to be tracked and then reported on. So this could be a really good visual to get some good information on your system itself. And now I'll jump over to the Google Analytics side. So here you can see on the actual dashboard itself, there's some really good information about users, the number of users you can get information on. So who's using your system, how many, as well as active sessions and session duration. So you can see some really good trends on that over the last certain days, and it's a really powerful tool. There's also real-time reporting. So I'll show you that page in a second, but you can get some real-time. You can also see where or how people are getting to your system, as well as where they're accessing it from. So you can see us, we're heavily in the United States, but there's also a couple in the UK. And then what time of day, which it can be really powerful to see when you have your peak time. And so a couple of the pages I'd like to show, I'll go to the real-time quick. So you can see what pages they're actually using, how many are active, as well as where they are. So that can be a really powerful tool to give you more information about your environment. And then here, you can also look at, let's go under traffic, referrals. You can see how they're getting to your page. So as Jason mentioned, we have a Mindbreeze, a third-party search tool. So with that, we can see that users are actually using it, and that's how they're getting their content. There's also all pages. So you can see which pages are the most popular, what are users doing, how many times that's happening, average page load, which we can also go to site speed and view an overview here. And you can see there's a lot of good information on your average load or page load time. By browser, is there a browser that performs better? You can see by country, what's the average load speed there, as well as by page. Maybe you have specific pages that a lot of users are hitting and they're not optimized or something like that. You can get some good information there. And with that, I think I can pass it back to Jason. I appreciate your time.
So with that, I'm going to conclude today's webinar, and I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks again.